I go out on a starlight night, I very often take a pair of binoculars and use both eyes, but for the telescope you use only one eye. Well, why can't you have a binocular telescope? And now we have a large one, the LBT, Large Binocular Telescope, in Arizona. And Chris and I've been over there to have a look at it.
This is Mount Graham, near the town of Safford in Arizona. At the top is an amazing telescope, and my guide for the journey up there is the man who built it, Dr. Jim Slagle.
Can you see that peak up there that has all those antennas?
Yeah, just on the right there.
That actually goes back into the 1800s. The name of the peak is called Heliograph Peak.
Okay.
And obviously heliograph was a form of communication that the Army used, and they used it, of course, for Indian raids. And so Heliograph Peak has gone way, way back in history. We are not on the highest peak. We're on the third highest peak. And we actually did choose that for a reason. In the Native American beliefs, they believe that the highest mountain on any mountain range is sacred.
So when was the mountain first identified as somewhere astronomers would want to be?
Started in the 80s, in the early 80s, with exploration of different mountain ranges. In fact, they spent actually several years on this mountain, had a travel trailer lived through the summer and winter, looking at the state of the sky.
But it doesn't look that good today. This isn't your good season.
This is called our monsoon season, and we actually officially started last week.
So that's why we've got cloud over the mountain today.
And that's what you brought with you when you drove down from Phoenix.
Proper London weather.
It is proper London.
Getting planning permission to build the telescope wasn't easy. The need to protect the Mount Graham red squirrel got the environmentalists worried and delayed the telescope for several years. But Jim's biggest headache was the road on the way to the summit.
This actually was a road that was used by wagons in the history of the people using this mountain. By the way, we've climbed 2,000 feet. That's a fairly fast climb, by the way.
Sure.
An astronomer measured, I won't say an astronomer, but I heard that it was an astronomer, counted the number of turns on this road. 523 turns. And I mean, that's a lot of turns in a short period of time. So when you ask me, what's one of your problems? When you see it for yourself, you'll understand the magnitude of getting those pieces up this mountain.
I mean, getting 2 8-meter mirrors up this road is scary enough for.
That's why I was your height and I weighed a lot less and I didn't have blood pressure problems. So.
In all, more than 600 tons of steel for the telescope, let alone the enclosure, had to be brought up the mountain. But the telescope's complete, and Jim and I have finally come to the end of our journey.
So here we are at the Large Binocular Telescope. It's 16 stories tall, and the silver part is 12 stories tall. There's 1,450 tons of steel in the silver part that rotates, and of course this 4 stories in green here that you see is stationary building, but is central to the supplying the needs for the astronomers and also during construction.
At 10,500 feet above sea level, the Large Binocular Telescope is in a stunning sight. But it's once you're inside the building that you truly appreciate what's being built here. As the telescope moved around, all we could hear was a faint hum. Its 2 giant 8.4-meter mirrors, each weighing 16 tons, sit firmly in its steel mount. Although the telescope's operational, it's yet to gain its instruments which will sit in the center gantry. These will use light from both telescopes, and only then will the LBT achieve its full resolution.
Well, Chris, it's like I told you, 10 stories tall, and it weighs 850 tons, and it floats on oil.
The scale of it is unbelievable.
I know, and everything here is controlled by computer, so that every piece of equipment that you see on this telescope, it's all computerized. We actually keep track of everything down in the control center, from temperature to weight, any kind of measurement that you might think of. We have total control just by the computerization of the telescope.
So tell us a bit about the structure that it's sitting in, because
all of this was made in Milan, Italy. I shouldn't say all of it now because we're refining the telescope, but the major parts of it were built in Milan. It took them over 2.5 years to build the pieces. Then they were shipped here to the United States, to Houston, where then we took it over road and brought it up here. We have a balancing system that we've just added to this. You know how many times you'd be observing. If they wanted to change an instrument, you might lose that night.
Oh, it takes hours, because you need these big counterweights.
Our way of doing things is a little bit different here, and we can actually balance the telescope within 30 minutes. So we have the ability electronically, once more, with computers, of making this work. You are seeing the forerunner of the big telescopes, and we hope that all the changes we're introducing here are the things that we'll see improved upon in the future.
So the telescope saw first light in October 2004. What's happened since then?
We've had our first illuminizing. Actually, we've had two illuminizing taking place here.
That's the coating for the mirrors.
That's the coating for the mirrors. Somebody asked me one time, they said, well, do you take the mirrors down the road when you need to have them illuminized? We only wanted to bring those mirrors up here once. The real reason why Ohio State did our illuminizing system, and so we clean the mirrors, we illuminize the mirrors, everything is done on site.
Once the doors are open, the light comes in, hits the massive primary mirror, travels up to the secondary, and is reflected back down and off a third mirror, which sends the light out onto the observing platform. And that's where light from this mirror is combined with that of its twin on the other side of the telescope. And that's the beauty of the large binocular telescope. By combining light in this way, we end up with the resolution of a telescope that has a mirror more than 20 meters across. The next step for the LBT is to bring its adaptive optics online. That will eliminate much of the interference from the Earth's atmosphere, making its images even clearer. There's much work still to be done on the LBT, but you can be sure, when it's fully operational, its double vision will give us a view of the night sky unlike any other.
Chris, I wish I'd been with you. Said I wasn't, but at least we have now the director of the LBT, Professor Richard Green, who's come to join us. Richard, welcome to the Sky Tonight.
Thank you very much.
First of all, why was it decided to build a binocular telescope?
The goal was to achieve very sharp resolution on the sky. And there are two issues that you have to deal with to do that. One is the blur of the atmosphere, and this telescope compensates for that blur by changing the shape of its secondary mirror 1,000 times a second, and it restores the shape of the light wave coming in.
1,000 times a second?
Yes, it has 672 magnets glued on the back of a very thin sheet of glass. It's 90 centimeters in diameter and 1.6 millimeters thick, and this glass continuously changes shape.
Well, you've started your main programs. What exactly are your main programs going to be?
When we combine the two beams, we'll actually take pictures that are 10 times sharper than the best pictures from Hubble. So to use that exquisite resolution, we'll want to penetrate into the regions where new stars are being formed to learn about the disks in which planets might ultimately form, and maybe even image a planet directly. We'll want to go into the bulges, the central spherical regions of nearby galaxies, and count individual stars to try to do stellar archaeology and learn how those galaxies were assembled. And ultimately, we'll want to probe to farther distances and look into the hearts of quasars to see to weigh the black hole, to see how hard it's pulling on stars and gas in its vicinity. And maybe, in the end, get out to the most distant redshifts in the visible universe and see how galaxies were assembled out of their smaller constituent parts.
What new equipment will you use on this in the foreseeable future?
We're phasing in the equipment piece by piece at the moment, and so the ultimate achievement will be the ones that actually combine the beams from the two sides. These instruments are enormous. The principal investigator of one of the beam combining instruments has a photo of himself, and he's stretched out, and he takes up about a quarter of his optical bench with all the optical elements required to capture the light from the two sides. It's our job to hold the distance that the light travels after it hits the first mirror until it gets into his instrument, which is about 24 meters, and our job is to hold that accurate to about 10,000ths of a millimeter. Then his instrument takes over and has to match up the crests and troughs of the light waves to a tenth of a 1,000th of a millimeter. So he has a little cryogenic slide trombone that moves up and down and matches the waves from the two sides to achieve the perfect focus.
It's fair to say then